Have you ever wondered why some people seem stuck in black and white thinking, unable to handle complexity, or why others constantly seek external validation, shaping their beliefs around what others expect? These are signs of individuals who haven't fully grown in their constructive development, the way we make sense of the world and our place in it. Robert Kegan's theory of adult constructive development helps us understand why some people remain stuck at certain levels of development. Kegan believed that our way of interpreting reality evolves through stages, from being shaped by external forces to becoming truly self-authored and self-transforming. But here's the key: not everyone fully integrates these stages, and the consequences can be profound. These gaps in development can affect our relationships, decision-making, and even how we navigate conflict and change. Research on Robert Kegan's theory of constructive development suggests that most adults do not reach the higher stages of development. These estimates primarily come from longitudinal studies conducted by Kegan and his colleagues, especially his books, The Evolving Self and In Over Our Heads. Additionally, research from adult development scholars, including Lisa Leahy and Susan Cook-Gruder, supports these distributions. Kegan's research was based on structured interviews and developmental assessments conducted across various populations, including professionals, students, and general adult samples. Now, how is this theory different from Piaget's theory of cognitive development, which we discussed in the first video of this series? While Piaget's theory of cognitive development focuses on how we learn to think, from concrete to abstract reasoning, Kegan's theory goes deeper, explaining how we construct meaning itself and taking society into account. Humans are social creatures, so acknowledging how our society can shape our development is certainly important to consider. Piaget's stages mostly end in adolescence, but Kegan's model continues into adulthood, showing how our sense of self and understanding of the world evolve over time. Rather than just gaining new cognitive skills, Kegan's theory describes how we shift from relying on external authority to developing our own values, and eventually integrating multiple perspectives beyond our own. For example, think of someone whose identity is completely tied to their social group, like someone who only ever goes out to drink every single weekend because that's what his or her friend group does. Or an employee who agrees with their boss's opinions, not because they genuinely believe them, but because they fear rejection or disapproval. This person is operating at what Kegan called the socialized mind, where their sense of self depends on the expectations of others. On the other hand, think of somebody who thinks more independently but becomes rigid in their personal beliefs, like a leader who refuses to take feedback because they believe they've already figured everything out, or thinking about someone who's just really stubborn in their beliefs or their ideology. In this case, the individual has reached the self-authored mind, where they follow their own values, but they may struggle with true adaptability and seeing beyond their own perspective. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand Kegan's stages of development, but also gain insight into why some people never seem to grow beyond their current way of thinking, and how you can continue evolving to navigate life with greater wisdom and flexibility. So let's dive into Kegan's theory and explore how you can develop a deeper, more adaptive mindset. This video is part of a series that explains the bigger picture of human consciousness and the lines of human development as proposed by integral theory, developed by theorist and author Ken Wilber. Ken Wilber's integral theory provides a comprehensive framework for understanding the complexity of human growth. It integrates various lines of development, each one representing a distinct area of human evolution. These lines, from cognitive and moral growth and spirituality, shape how we experience and interact with the world. Wilber's approach emphasizes that these lines of development are interwoven and evolve simultaneously, influencing one another as we move through different stages of life. The first of these lines is the cognitive line, which focuses on how we think and process information. As we develop cognitively, we move from simple patterns of understanding to more complex abstract reasoning. The work of theorists like Piaget and Kegan shows how cognitive cognitive structures evolve through different stages, each one building on the last, leading to a more sophisticated way of thinking and problem solving. In this series, we'll dive deep into these lines of development, from cognitive and moral growth to emotional intelligence and spirituality, based on the insights of researchers like Piaget, Kohlberg, Maslow, and more. Each video will uncover how these areas of growth influence your personal evolution and what can happen if these stages are not fully developed or integrated. Some adults still display behaviors and thought patterns that suggest they're stuck in earlier stages of development, not in cognitive ability, but in how they construct meaning in their lives. Robert Kegan's theory of constructive development explains how people evolve from relying on external authority to shaping their own values, and ultimately transcending rigid identities altogether. However, not everyone progresses through these stages fully. Factors like trauma, societal pressures, or a lack of self-reflection can leave people trapped in outdated ways of thinking that no longer serve them. In this video, we'll break down Kegan's stages of development, explore what happens when someone fails to integrate each stage, and examine how this impacts personal growth, relationships, and decision making. I'll also use examples from pop culture to illustrate these ideas and help you recognize where you and those around you might be on this developmental journey. Let's start with Kegan's first stage, the impulsive mind, where a person's actions are driven by immediate desires, emotions, and external stimuli. Less than 1% of adults are stuck at this stage. At this stage, there's little ability to regulate impulses or consider long-term consequences. Young children in this stage act on whatever they feel in the moment, whether it's grabbing a toy, crying for attention, or running towards something exciting without thinking about safety. In adults, traces of the impulsive mind appear when someone struggles with self-control, acting purely on instinct without pausing to reflect. Think of someone who lashes out in anger during an argument, says hurtful things, and then later regrets it. Or a person who indulges in unhealthy habits, like binge eating or reckless spending, simply because it feels good in the moment. A pop culture example of this is Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. He lacks a stable sense of self beyond his immediate desires, reacting to the world around him purely through sensation, whether it's aesthetic pleasure, social status, or violent urges. His lack of internal meaning making leaves him incapable of true self-reflection, showing the danger of never developing beyond this primal stage of experience. Kegan's next stage, the Imperial mind, represents an early form of meaning making, where a person is primarily driven by their own desires, needs, and impulses. About 6% of adults are at this stage. Here, individuals see the world in terms of what benefits or threatens them, with little concern for others' perspectives unless it directly affects them. Their sense of self is tied to what they can control and acquire. The Imperial mind can be seen in people who act purely out of self-interest without reflection or regard for deeper values. Think of someone who constantly pursues wealth, power, or pleasure with no real consideration for how their actions affect others. Whether it's a ruthless executive stepping on colleagues to climb the corporate ladder, or someone who manipulates relationships purely for personal gain. An example of this is Tony Montana from Scarface. His entire worldview revolves around personal domination, acquiring money, power, and control at any cost. He sees relationships as transactional, trusts no one, and reacts aggressively when his authority is challenged. His inability to think beyond his own self-interest ultimately leads to his downfall, highlighting the limitations of an unchecked imperial mind. As people develop beyond impulsive and self-focused stages, they often enter the socialized mind, where their sense of identity is largely shaped by external influences. Family, friends, cultural norms, or institutions. About 58% of adults operate at the socialized mind. Instead of defining their own beliefs and values, they adopt the perspectives of their social environment. At this stage, people seek approval, avoid conflict, and measure their worth based on how well they fit into the expectations of those around them. Now imagine an adult who struggles to make independent decisions because they are constantly worried about what others will think. Take someone who chooses a career not because they are passionate about it, but because their parents expect them to. They may become a lawyer, doctor, or business professional, not out of personal conviction, but because society tells them it's the right path. In relationships, this mindset might show up in someone who stays in an unfulfilling relationship just to meet social or religious expectations, Even if they are unhappy, their fear of disapproval keeps them from asserting their own needs. Let me bring up an example of a character who evolved past this stage. In pop culture, we see this pattern in Steve Rogers' Captain America in his early years. In Captain America: The First Avenger, Steve initially follows orders without question, fully embracing the ideals given to him by the military and his government. We do see him sometimes break away and do what he thinks is right, like moving past simply being an icon and into a hero despite orders from General Chester Phillips to not go looking to save a missing unit. However, Steve still embodies the values instilled in him by US propaganda and doesn't yet question whether the system he serves is truly aligned with his personal beliefs. In Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Steve discovers that S.H.I.E.L.D., the very institution he serves, has been infiltrated by Hydra, an army he fought in World War II that became a secret organization. As he uncovers Hydra's deep-rooted corruption with S.H.I.E.L.D., he realizes that the organization he trusted has been manipulating global security under the guise of protection. Project Insight, a preemptive strike program, directly opposes his belief in freedom, forcing him to question everything he once followed without hesitation. This marks a shift from the socialized mind, where he conformed to external expectations, to the self-authored mind, where he defines his own moral code. By Captain America: Civil War, this transformation is complete. He rejected the Sokovia Accords, which mandated that he only take action if directed by the United Nations, refusing to let institutions dictate his ethics, choosing personal conscience over blind obedience. Now, this transition is crucial. Those who remain stuck in the socialized mind often struggle to form independent thoughts and may rely on external authorities for validation and direction. They may never question the traditions they inherit, even when those beliefs no longer serve them. However, those who move forward begin to ask, what do I truly believe? What values matter to me beyond what I've been taught? By understanding this stage, you can recognize whether you're living by your values or simply following the script that's handed to you. The path to deeper growth requires questioning, challenging assumptions, and ultimately defining your own worldview. About 35% of adults reach the self-authoring mind. At the self-authoring mind stage, individuals no longer rely on societal norms or external validation to shape their beliefs and values. Instead, they develop an internal framework, defining their own purpose, identity, and moral code. Rather than blindly following authority or collective expectations, they critically evaluate the systems they once adhered to and take full ownership of their choices, even when those choices go against the grain. However, there is a reason why this is not the final stage. A powerful example of a character in pop culture who embodies this stage is Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. Early in her journey, she seeks legitimacy through external sources, first obeying her brother Viserys, then conforming to the expectations of the Dothraki, and later striving to be the liberator of the oppressed in Essos. However, as she grows, she begins to define her own vision of leadership. She no longer claims her right to the Iron Throne through birthright, but through her self-authored philosophy of justice, believing she is destined to break the wheel of tyranny. While forging one's own path is essential for growth, the self-authoring mind also has its pitfalls. Without checks and balances, the mindset can become rigid, overly idealistic, or even dangerous. Daenerys' unwavering belief in her own moral vision blinds her to alternative perspectives, leading her to justify increasingly extreme actions in pursuit of her goals. She becomes so consumed by her self-authored mission that she dismisses all outside input, seeing any dissent as opposition rather than guidance. To move beyond this stage, it's crucial to remain open to other perspectives and acknowledge the possibility that you could be wrong. As we've discussed in previous videos, personal growth doesn't mean clinging to a singular vision. It means continuously evolving by integrating new insights and adapting to the complexities of the world. By embracing this flexibility, one can transition into the final stage of development. Only about 1% of adults make it to the self-transforming mind. At the self-transforming mind stage, individuals go beyond simply crafting their own internal framework. They recognize that no single perspective including their own, holds absolute truth. Unlike the self-authoring mind, which is defined by a strong personal ideology, the self-transforming mind is characterized by the ability to step outside of one's own belief system, critically examine it, and evolve when new insights emerge. This means that you are open to always learning something new and acknowledging the possibility that you could be wrong. Instead of seeing challenges to their worldview as threats, they welcome them as opportunities for growth. A great example of this transformation in pop culture is Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Throughout the series, Aang struggles with his duty as the Avatar and his deeply held belief in non-violence. While he initially views pacifism as an unshakable moral principle, his journey forces him to confront the reality that rigidly holding on to any single ideology can be limiting. In the series finale, when faced with the responsibility of stopping Fire Lord Ozai, Aang is torn between his belief that taking a life is wrong and the overwhelming pressure to unalive his enemy for the greater good. Instead of rejecting either side outright, Aang undergoes deep introspection by speaking to multiple perspectives of his past lives with different lived experiences, speaking to his friends, and considering the old teachings from his monk teachers of not taking a life. Aang meditates on this and considers all these perspectives, some of which told him the best thing to do is to unalive the Fire Lord who is destroying and enslaving so many people, but he ultimately finds a solution that aligns with his values while still addressing the reality of the situation, choosing to remove Ozai's bending rather than unaliving him. This decision demonstrates the essence of the self-transforming mind, the ability to hold multiple perspectives, integrate them, and adapt in a way that transcends rigid thinking. At this stage, a person no longer defines themselves by a single ideology, role, or identity. They embrace change, contradiction, and uncertainty, understanding that wisdom is not about clinging to one truth, but about constantly expanding their perspective. They don't just author their own story. They recognize that their story is still being written, and they remain open to rewriting it when needed. Reaching this stage isn't about discarding one's past beliefs, but rather seeing them as part of a larger evolving process. The challenge, however, is that this mindset can feel isolating, as fewer people operate at this level of awareness. It requires humility, adaptability, and a willingness to hold paradoxes rather than seek definitive answers. Ultimately, the self-transforming mind isn't about having all the answers. It's about knowing that growth never stops. The world is complex, and the moment we believe we fully understand it is the moment that we stop learning. Understanding Kegan's constructive development theory helps us recognize how we evolve in our capacity to understand and engage with the world. According to Kegan, we shift through stages where our sense of self, relationships, and worldview expand and deepen. As we grow, we move from being externally focused, relying on authority and rules, to becoming more internally oriented, capable of holding multiple perspectives, and acting from a more integrated sense of self. The challenge, however, is that many of us get stuck at earlier stages, unable to see beyond our own narrow lens. The good news is that growth is always possible, and the path forward is one of continuous integration. To evolve beyond the constraints of earlier stages, embrace practices that foster deeper reflection. Mindfulness and meditation can help you observe your internal world and challenge limiting beliefs. Engage in conversations with people who challenge your assumptions and push you to think more expansively. Read widely. Aim to read as many books as possible and explore ideas that expand your view of the world. By embracing these practices, you can move beyond old thought patterns, develop a more complex understanding of others, and begin to make decisions from a place of greater self-awareness. Growth isn't just about gaining knowledge. It's about transforming the way that we relate to ourselves and others. So, integrate these practices into your life and watch as you progress into a more conscious, reflective, and intentional way of being. Make sure you subscribe to watch the next video in this series of lines of development, and check out this video right here to learn more about topics related to psychology, spirituality, and how the world affects you.